Franklin Graham posted a tweet earlier this week. This is all in relation to what's happening across the Atlantic with the Ukraine and Russia. Franklin Graham tweeted, "Pray for President Putin today." This may sound like a strange request, but we need to pray that God would work in his heart so that war could be avoided at all cost. May God give wisdom to the leaders involved in these talks and negotiations, as well as those advising them. And I wanted to read the entire tweet because I wanted to give some context to what I'm about to say. This is Franklin Graham, Christian celebrity, if there ever was one, coming from Christian royalty, right? If you consider Billy Graham to be somebody who garners positive thoughts and memories in most people's minds, being an incredible evangelist, dedicating his life to seeing people come to Christ.
Well, I only took most of my classes in Billy Graham Hall, so,
Yeah, so he's got a place in the Christian history book somewhere. He'll be a footnote somewhere. Franklin Graham is not Billy Graham. He has very carefully positioned himself over the years that he is a multimedia mogul. He is a business mogul. He's a religious icon. Franklin Graham's tweets are not just these things that he just kind of blasts out at a moment's notice. They're carefully crafted. There's audio and video and graphic teams working on these. He's got social media teams. He's got political teams. He has advisors all around him to make sure that these tweets are saying exactly what he wants to say, as well as keeping him from making PR mistakes that he doesn't want to make. And the reason I say that is because I think if you parse this tweet, you are going to see very carefully that this tweet is really meant for an audience of one. And in my opinion, this tweet is carefully crafted to appeal to Donald Trump. Pray for President Putin today, who we all know that, Donald Trump and President Putin are fast friends, good buddies. Donald Trump never has anything but good things to say about Putin. This is a very public way of demonstrating his fealty, his loyalty to Donald Trump, at the same time being able to put on his holy hat as well and appeal to a larger audience. But what's interesting is that everything else is just kind of like a very general prayer. God gives wisdom to leaders and who are in these talks and negotiations. Like, would it be so hard just to say, hey, I also pray for my president. I also pray for the people of the Ukraine whose lives are being turned upside down. I pray for the young men and women who might have to go to war and lose their lives over this. But none of that gets mentioned. The only person who's important in this is Vladimir Putin, in order to tell Donald Trump that hey, I'm on your side, brother.
Yeah, when I read this tweet, and there's an article associated with it where I read it, of course, and I wanted to come, from the most ironic direction that I could, just be the most grace-filled with this. And the person that wrote this article, was it Yahoo News, really hit it on the head. Is if this had come from any other pastor, we'd probably just blow right by it.
Yeah.
And not give it much thought. If Francis Chan said this, or even Stephen Furtick, or, some other famous guy that's not Greg Locke.
Right.
We would have been able to just kind of be like, oh, I get where you're coming from. Pray for your enemy, love your enemy, pray on behalf of those who persecute you. Right.
Exactly.
It makes sense. That it's not like the message on its face is upsetting or absurd, but it's the context behind it that started to undo it for me. Like, the more I analyzed it and kind of came at it, I'm like, well, how much of just a complete maniac do you have to be to tweet, pray for Putin, and ignore the fact that Putin already, annexed Crimea,
right,
and is now going after Ukraine, because he wants to basically kind of reestablish some kind of Soviet-like dominance of the region.
Right.
And that's a problem. He has already demonstrated himself to be an evil man. So for me, this tweet really fell flat.
Yeah.
Because you cannot say this guy has already proven himself to be the aggressor. We shouldn't be saying, well, pray for Putin that we can end this without war. No, Putin wants war. He has been saying for a long while now how much he wants to own this place.
Right.
maybe I'm extra ticked off because my grandmother was born in Ukraine. Her family immigrated here.
Yeah.
So, maybe there's that kind of familial anger. It's like, leave my heritage alone. But this isn't a good guy. This is not a guy that requires our prayer. We need to be praying against Putin. We need to be praying for the people of Ukraine.
Right.
We need to be, praying that the UN and, our president don't just let this aggression go unchecked. Should Putin decide to make the next step forward.
Yeah. I also posted a very short form video about this on TikTok, which blew up the tiniest amount, just the tiniest amount. But
Yeah.
one of the points I was trying to make is, at what point in Christian history and in the life of the church did we start praying for the warmongers and stop praying for the peacemakers? Like in any other conflict in American history, even if we didn't like who was the president of the United States at the moment, somebody would still stand up and say, let's pray for our president. Even if they couldn't stomach saying his name, they would still say, we need to pray for our president. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And now the battle lines are so clearly drawn. We are Christians, therefore we are conservatives, therefore we are Republicans, that we will not acknowledge that Democrats and liberals have any value whatsoever to any process.
Yeah, and that's really the shame, is that this requires a lot of political will.
Yeah.
To have anything meaningful happen. We can pray, and that's certainly all most of us can really do.
Right.
Is sit down and pray for peace, and pray that Putin will be convicted of his sinfulness.
Yeah.
In this matter, not just pray from that war. No. Specifically, we need to be praying for him to be convicted of his own sin.
Right.
And for his greed to be laid out in front of him so bare that for him to do anything to move forward condemns his own soul.
Right.
I mean, I do mean to use that kind of a strong language, because that's what it is. When we talk about church discipline, the person who refuses to accept their sin as sin is to be kicked out of the church. Well, if a national leader is going to violate national sovereignty of another country for his own desires, whatever exactly his end goal, I cannot say. But it does seem to be some kind of Soviet-like domination here, at least of this territory, if not more. Because what's to stop him from here to go to Kazakhstan? Because who cares about Kazakhstan?
Yeah.
Not a lot of Americans really do, other than, they watch a Borat movie.
Right. When I started writing my notes out, all that came up were questions, mostly rhetorical. I'm not the sharpest, blade in the drawer, but I'm reasonably intelligent. My questions are the same questions as always. Why is it that Christian celebrities never have to be held to a spiritual standard, to a biblical standard, to an ethical standard, to a compassionate standard? Why is it they always get to kind of fly above and get to say whatever they want to say without fear of any sort of blowback? So that's my first thought. And of course, the other thought that I always have is, where's the church? Why is there never any outrage anymore over a clear desire to wish to be divisive?
I guess the first issue, when it comes to somebody having celebrity, right, that kind of makes him a de facto leader in the eyes of many.
Right.
And there's a long-standing tradition, at least in this country, I can't speak for other countries, where, churches teach a deference to leadership.
Right.
But that deference has a limit. It can only go so far. Even Paul, he lauds one of the churches for basically going and fact-checking whatever he said. It's like he's talking about scripture, and they go and they pull up the scroll of Isaiah and be like, okay, yeah, he was talking the right stuff. Yeah, he wasn't making this up.
Yeah.
Cool. And that was an apostle, right? The apostle Paul, right? So it's like, we need to do that today, and just because somebody is in a place, just because they have the last name Graham.
Yeah.
It shouldn't afford them any kind of rank above anybody else. And for pastors to speak out, or anybody in a leadership role in the church to speak out about political matters, becomes real dicey real fast.
I think the one, like we talk about accountability a lot. We talk about having systems in place that help you with accountability. I think one of the things we haven't talked about yet, which should be interesting to get into, is the idea of idolatry and how we turn these celebrities who are supposed to be shepherds, right? Who are supposed to be servants,
Hmm.
and instead we turn them into idols. And it's amazing how quickly something as harmless as respect and admiration can turn into something pernicious, I guess is a good word, right? It's not necessarily
Yeah, great
dangerous,
word.
but maybe pernicious, and all of a sudden this great respect now gets turned into a sort of currency that this person can use to get away with having no regard at all for the principles that Jesus tried to teach us.
Right. Yeah. And there's this aspect of, parasocial relationships that can happen. It's especially a big issue for, for YouTubers.
Sure.
When somebody has, consumes so much from, one of these celebrities, they can develop an unhealthy attachment to that individual as if it's a real relationship. And so, if Franklin Graham has a lot of people that love what he does, generally, it can be a problem for somebody like you or me to come along and criticize him, or for somebody more, like Tony Campolo or Shane Claiborne,
Right.
who has a lot bigger names than us.
Sure.
Because the moment they go to criticize, that's like attacking a member of my family.
Exactly. Right. It's very personal.
Which it's not, but it's psychologically that's what ends up happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big reason that the people most, proximal to these celebrities don't rise up and be like, hey, son, y'all got to back up a bit because that was stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important that from the pulpit, whether your pulpit is a physical church or whether your pulpit is YouTube or a podcast or some sort of paraministry like feeds the hungry, houses the homeless, I think it's super important that we always stick to biblical basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be first means to actually make yourself last. If you want to be the highest, you make yourself the lowest. If you want respect, you live with humility. And remembering that these things that we want so badly and that the things that we're taught that are good to have in a capitalist society are the things that we always kind of need to remind ourselves to put in their proper place and to put ourselves in the proper position when we try to take good care of our families, when we try to be good citizens, when we attempt to make the most impact with the years that we have on this earth. When we try to do that, we do that in right relationship with ourselves, with one another, and with God.
Yeah, and I think, as an offering of some kind of a solution, I think that Christians need to be every bit as aware as the psychologists that study this stuff, that we develop attachments in weird ways.
Yeah.
Our brains process information strangely sometimes. Like we will automatically reject something that's too far off center for us, right? Because it's too different. I can't deal with it. But that different information may very well be the thing we need to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And the net result is that, our mind plays tricks on us
Yeah.
a lot. We might think we're thinking rationally, but we're not.
Right.
And to borrow the words of Mike Muir, lead singer of Suicidal Tendencies, when he says, you see people think they think, but they're not really thinking. So they stop thinking because they thought they already thought, but they never were in the first place. So it's their own little safety level.
Right.
And that's such a true statement, as hard as it is to utter without stuttering it.
Yeah.
We look for those places that are comfortable, and we oftentimes deceive ourselves into thinking we've already worked through something.
Yeah.
So we should not take these things for granted,
Yeah.
and not be afraid. We always talk about speaking truth to power. That's a very popular phrase you hear in the church, right?
Sure.
We need to actually do it,
Yeah.
especially to our power, because that's the only power that really is going to listen to Christian values, right?
Yeah.